Hello, Flawless family. April is Autism Awareness Month, and we are fortunate to be speaking with an expert in the field, Miss Angel Wilson. And Angel is the owner of SPARC Guidance, an organization dedicated to helping others become more autism informed. And she brings passion and a wealth of experience over 15 years to the autism field to advocate for awareness and acceptance across the board. So, thanks for joining us again today, Angel.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So the first question, it's a rule of thumb here at Flawless Foundation, is we like to ask people how they're really doing, how you're actually doing. So how are you really doing today?
I'm actually doing really good today. Today is a good day. I have some things on my agenda that I'm excited to be doing today. So today's a good day, actually.
Cool, cool. I'm happy to hear that. I hope you're staying dry with all the rain that we've been getting down here in South Florida.
Yeah, a lot, but we needed it.
Yeah, we do. April showers bring May flowers, but I'm glad to hear you're doing pretty well. I did mention you had a wealth of education, experience, and wisdom that you bring to this, field of autism awareness. So, when you first started, what was your initial inspiration that got you excited to start this work?
I first started in the mental health field. That's where all of my degrees basically have been. But I did know that I wanted to work with kids. I've always been interested in play therapy and things like that. And so my initial, I guess you could say, like forays into it, were dealing with kids that were dealing with different issues going on, such as like divorce, death of a family member, things like that. But even in that, I noticed there would be kids who were a bit different. And I noticed even back then, like 12, 13, 14 years ago, that oftentimes a lot of us in the field and just in general didn't really know how to handle these kids. I didn't know, I knew of autism, but at that time I didn't know this is autism. And it wasn't until I started working at Early Steps here in Palm Beach County as a family service coordinator that I really got introduced to it, because they deal with basically all kids who have developmental delays, autism, physical disabilities, the whole 9 yards. And that was my first real introduction into autism. And then when I moved out to California, not too long after that, and I spent about 8 years in California, all of my jobs out there basically had to do strictly with autism. And so I got to see a lot of that's where I got introduced to the field. And that just kind of grew and expounded not just the love of working with kids, but working with this particular population of kids.
Yeah, and I can see how just the kind of the way your career path has taken. You were more exposed to it, especially going to California. I can see how your inspiration, your passion has grown. But can you just share a little bit more as to why you felt it was necessary to not just work in the field, not just be an employee, but you actually went ahead and started your own organization dedicated to autism education. So can you just tell us a little bit more why you felt the need to take that jump?
Sure. I guess the spark, joke, came for it while I was in the midst of the field. Because during the time that I was working, and I did all kinds of jobs, everything from behavioral tech to a supervisor of behavioral tech, to trainer, assessor, you name it, I kind of did it. During that time, the two things that I kept seeing come up over and over again was, one, a lot of parents saying that, hey, I'm trying to put my kids into, say, like daycare or preschool, and none of these daycares and preschools can handle my kids. Like, they all say, you know what, we can't deal with this. You have to come and get them. And it was becoming a nightmare for a lot of parents to even find like just good daycare, or a daycare that could take care of their kids and knew how to take care of their kids. And then on the flip side of the those of us that were providers in the field, there were a lot of folks who definitely had like an interest in learning more about autism. This included daycare staff, teachers, and so forth, but they weren't getting enough of the education that they needed for it. They would get some, especially say like ESC teachers, of course, but mainstream teachers and other folks who were not, I guess you could say, like directly associated with autism, but would probably have autistic clients. They didn't really know how to handle it either. So unless they had prior experience, or it kind of just jumped in, kind of like how I did, they didn't know how to work with autistic kids. And this kept like gnawing at the back of my head for literal years, until finally, when I moved back here in 2018, I was like, you know what? I need to go ahead and just bite the bullet and do it. I can see that this is a need. I saw it in California. I definitely see it here in Florida. There's clearly a need for this. There's a gap here. And so I need to, if no one's going to fill that gap, I might as well go ahead and fill that gap. And that's kind of how it happens. There's this movie called Robots that came out like years ago. And one of the main taglines in that movie is see a need, fill a need. And I think a lot of us who end up starting businesses, regardless of what the business is, I think that's the core of kind of why we do it. We saw a need and we want to fill it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And especially because I think everybody will say it's hard to be a parent, let alone in a situation like this where there's a lot less resources and access and things of that
Mhm.
nature. So, right, like you just said, see a need, feel a need. So, glad to hear you're doing that work. And part of that work that you're doing, you've actually developed the 4 A's of autism, which are
Mhm.
awareness, acceptance, affirmation, and advocacy. So I would love to hear you kind of expound on what it represents and how it relates to the mission of SPARC Guidance.
It pretty much more or less is the mission, I think. Like whenever someone asks me, like, what is the purpose of Spark? I say, well, basically the 4 A's. Awareness and acceptance are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of people talk about autism awareness and acceptance, but I think what I've noticed in my experience is that there's a lot of people that know a little bit about autism, but still not enough to be comfortable with it. And
Mm.
so with the first two, I want to try to get people, one, to understand more about autism and not look at it as this scary thing that they may have to deal with, and then accept people, autistic people as they are and where they are. The affirmation part has to do with both kind of building confidence and giving affirmations to both autistic people and those who are going to be working with them. Because I've noticed, like I said before, there's a lack of confidence a lot of times with the workers. So I want to build that confidence on both sides. And then finally, advocacy. With that confidence, they're more likely to be advocates for these kids, for these families, for autism in general. And the more advocates you have, of course, the more likely, policies can be put in place to better help, more funding can come into different organizations to help with this. So advocacy is kind of the end goal of the entire business organization, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome. And maybe falling under that realm of advocacy and awareness. We talked about how this month, April, is National Autism Awareness Month. So how impactful do you find it into the community to have a month that is nationally dedicated to spreading awareness?
I think it's important, especially because I don't know if you know, but just within the last few weeks, the CDC brought out new statistics on autism, and the rate's now 1 in 36. So it shot it shot up. And so now more than ever, it goes about saying you're gonna run into someone on the spectrum at some point in time. If you're a
Mm.
teacher, I guarantee you're gonna have someone, a child or a teen or a young adult, come through your doors that's probably on the spectrum. And so now more than ever, we really need to make sure that people are aware of it and know kind of what to look for, because there could be many coming through who haven't even been diagnosed yet. On the flip side, looking at the autistic community, which are those who are actually autistic, believe it or not, a lot of them actually kind of dread this month. And it's because of the fact that they feel that their voices are not heard enough. They kind of get drowned out by a lot of the big organizations that are talking and so forth. And a lot of people, I think the organizations and the bigger companies, they mean well. They want to try to like support and so forth. But again, they may not know a lot. So I've seen situations where some of them may be spreading information that's not 100% true or is not, well informed. So that's another thing I want to try to build on and help kind of bridge that gap between the autistic community and what I call the autism community, which is supposed to be the allies and supporters of autism. Because in April in particular, the autistic community make it really clear that there's a gap there. And so I try to highlight more of those kind of stories. I try to pay attention to those stories a bit more and make sure that when I'm talking about it, be it in a training, be it in my podcast, that I'm informed and my information comes not just from, experts, so to speak, but also autistic people who are actually living with autism.
And you said something I did not know about those more recent statistics. You said 1 in 36.
Mhm.
And after that, you said something that really resonated. You said more than like, or most definitely at this point, you are going to run into someone that's on the spectrum, or if you're a teacher or in a related field, you are going to be in a position where you're dealing with children that are on the spectrum.
Mhm.
And so here at Flawless Kindness, what we do at Flawless, we have kindness and inclusion. These are some of our core messages, and we have this tagline, seeing the perfection in every person.
Mhm.
Flawless Foundation isn't saying that you're just perfect. It's more about you are perfectly imperfect. You're flawless regardless of everything. So I think it's just so important, what we're doing and how it pairs in what you're doing and how everyone is perfect despite their quote unquote flaws or whatnot. So when you kind of hear what we do, trying to make it a more inclusive world, a more kind world, how important is it speaking to people who are speaking to people on the spectrum, these values that we're talking about, how important is it in the work that you do, and how often do you see that in the work that you do?
I uh I want to see it more for sure,
Mm,
because even kind of like just floating through social media and the internet, the word autism and the word autistic are still seen as negatives and still
mm,
seen as like words used to bully or insult. And that for sure needs to be worked on and changed. And the fact that there are so many like autistic voices out there, that if people just willing to listen, they would learn a lot more, and it would break down that stigma related to autism. It's not, I think the saying within the autistic community is, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because it's different for every individual person.
wow.
So I think with especially with regards to inclusion, there's so much that autistic people can bring to not just like the workforce, because they have a serious issue with unemployment. I think well over half of autistic adults are unemployed when they have the skill sets that are needed, but because maybe they don't, they can't get through a traditional job interview, for example, because of what they're kind of asked to do. They're kind of, you have to maintain eye contact, you have to answer all these questions and in a pretty timely manner. Because of those things, they're kind of inadvertently blocked off from a lot of opportunities, and organizations and companies that could benefit from their skills, because they have a lot of amazing skills, they don't get access to those skills. And so I think starting with like very young, and starting with the teachers and daycare workers and everyone who works with these kids, starting to build this idea that it's their minds neurologically may be built a little different, but we're all human. We all have emotions, because that's another one that for a long time people didn't think that autistic people could feel anything. Some people still don't think that autistic people can feel anything. So just breaking down a lot of those stigmas can help kind of break down the fear and the apprehension, and make us more open to accommodate, and make us more open to kind of welcome autistic people into all these different nooks, crannies, and corners of the world and society, so that we can become far more enriched as a whole. Because, like I said, they have so much that they can bring, and we're as a whole, we're missing out by not including them.
Yeah, it's almost it reminds me of this quote that I heard. It said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, of course you think a fish is not skilled, right? So a lot of you could be misjudging a very talented animal because of the parameters it doesn't fit into. And I think it really resonates with what you're saying. There's plenty of smart, capable, skillful people that might be on the spectrum, but if we're trying to fit them in a specific box, we might end up misjudging them or missing out on very qualified individuals.
Mhm.
Just that example, just that knowledge that you're sharing. I know that you are sharing a lot of that on your podcast, Spark Up. Shameless plug for all those listening. Could you just tell us a little bit more about how you're using that specific platform to further educate people about autism?
Sure. That's kind of right now, it's almost become a thing almost in and of itself. It started out because I had the idea for a while, and then I was thankful to get a grant by a nonprofit here in Palm Beach County called Be Well PBC.
Mhm.
And so I was able to get the money, kind of get like some of the basic equipment. They also supplied us that won the grant with an editor. And originally it was supposed to be just kind of 4 episodes. And I said, well, let me, kind of put together ones that address some of the things that I've been wanting to tell people kind of in mass, just based on stories that I've heard from different people and things that I've heard that people may not know. And, it started kind of just from that. And then I got a really nice response. A lot of people liked the idea of it. And so I was like, well, we will just keep going. And now we're in season 2. And I'm just like, wow, it just kept going. But I really love the fact that it gives me opportunity to address things kind of like as I hear things kind of coming up, I can address them like pretty, quickly through the podcast. I know even now I'm thinking of the next kind of like, I call them mini sparks, like the shorter episodes that are like 15, 20 minutes long. I'm thinking of having one that's going to talk about disability, because I've learned recently that a lot of people do not know that autism is actually considered a legal disability. And I'm surprised how I've heard several times now that it's come up. They're like, "Oh, is it considered a disability?" I'm like, "Yes, it's covered by the ADA." It's like it's considered disability. So I said, "Oh, there's people that don't know that." So now it's like, "Oh, there's an idea for an episode." So as I kind of hear, things around, like if people start asking questions, or if I notice that there's something that's happening that's newsworthy in the autism world, I love the fact that I have this podcast now to get it out in a fairly quick manner. And I also have a platform where other people who work in the field and have different organizations that people may not know about can now come in and talk about those organizations. Just in the last, I say like month and a half, I had FAU CARD, which is the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. I had Best Buddies, who pairs up people with disabilities and mentors and peers to kind of, literally be their buddy. I've had someone from Early Steps who helps kind of pair families with resources. So it's a combination of all these different things that the podcast is allowing me to do and get out there, that especially information that people normally wouldn't have immediate access to.
Are you guys on TikTok yet?
I am not on TikTok yet. I've been kind of dreading TikTok, to be
Really?
honest. Like I know that everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, everyone's on TikTok," and I'm just like, I can barely keep up with Instagram, and y'all are asking me to also go on to TikTok. So I think I would need to actually bring on someone to help with the social media part of it. And I'm that is in the back of my head that eventually I'm probably going to have to do that.
Yeah, I just say it because just the way you're talking about the things you're doing, I'm just like, wow, that's just another great avenue to get your work out there more to the
Right.
masses. So just because what you're saying is just also impactful. So that's my tip for you. In exchange for that, I'm gonna ask for a tip for us because we are also having plans of starting a podcast. So just from your experience, I know we're kind of in the same umbrella and world of things. Kind of have different missions, but in the day we have the same goals in mind. So just what tips could you share to us about hosting a successful podcast?
Um, First, contrary to popular belief, you don't need this huge ton of equipment and a studio and all of this stuff in order to get started. Like I said, I got a little bit of money from the grant that I had, and I got a microphone, headphones, and I didn't have to, but I got a Focusrite, which is an audio interface that just makes you sound cleaner, basically, when you're speaking. And that's kind of it. That's where I started. Some people, I mean, for example, I don't know if you know Gary V. He's like a really famous like business entrepreneur. He has a podcast that has millions of people listening, and some episodes he literally just records from his phone and just uploads it. So you don't need a ton of equipment if you have a really good message, which kind of leads way into the second thing. I would say I kind of got my podcast started because I was hearing from other people things that people needed to know. So I would say, if you haven't already, listen to what's being kind of talked about or not talked about around you, and it's like, hey, what are the things that people keep asking questions about? What are the things that people are saying, I want to learn more about this, but I don't know where to start, or I want to hear more about, these people's stories, but I don't know how to find their stories. And just kind of listening to see what people are listening to and what they're not listening to. I, asked random people about different podcasts that they might be listening to and what kind of style they like. So I learned, for example, that a lot of people like kind of the conversational style. So I make a point that whenever I have interviews, they're very laid back, chill, and they do turn into just kind of conversations. Sometimes we go a little off topic. That's okay. And then we come back to the topic, but that's what editing is for. But I wanted it to be something that flowed and something that felt very natural. So I've noticed a lot of people seem to be responding to that. And make sure it's something that you just really enjoy and do not mind talking about for hours and hours on end, because that's what you'll be doing. And then I guess like write a script. People are like, oh, you can just go on there and just talk willy nilly. Nope, write a script, because otherwise it doesn't have to be like a detail, just kind of an outline for yourself.
Mhm.
And if you have a guest, I would say do an outline and share it with them as well, so that everyone comes in just like, give a heads up on questions beforehand, because that way everyone's kind of on the same page and no one is surprised and deer caught in headlights when you get to the time to actually record. So definitely do a script. You're thinking, I kind of know what I'm talking about. No, trust me. You hit record and sometimes your brain goes completely blank. And over time, you'll get to the point where it just kind of like flows. It ends up being like second nature.
Yeah, organization is definitely key. So no, we really, really appreciate that. We'll definitely take that into consideration as we kind of embark on that journey ourselves.
Mm.
But yeah, Angel, we're not going to take up too much more of your time. The last question we like to ask here is, we have this concept of a flawless world.
Mhm.
Think of it as like an ideal type of society. For example, here at Flawless, we're trying to revolutionize the way people perceive and talk about brain health and just kind of just change the narrative around it. And so for me, my flawless world personally is I would love to see a world where the same way you routinely go to your doctor, or you should, the same way you routinely go to your dentist, you'll also routinely go to a mental health professional, whether
Mm.
that's, semi-annually, whether that's every other week, whatever fits into your life. I would love to see a world where people say, "Oh yeah, my doctor is this guy. Oh yeah, my therapist is this guy." That's a flawless world for me, where we're all open about talking about our mental health. So for you, and I guess your organization, what you're pursuing, what do you envision a flawless world looking like?
That's a really good question. I think ideally for me, it would be a world where, one, autistic people don't feel the need to hide who they are
Mm.
for fear of rejection or fear of ridicule or being denied opportunities because, they stim or flap their hands or they have special interests that some people, can't, don't understand. And I also, I guess, at the same time envision a world where there is a there's true allyship, not like allyship for the sake of just showing off for like 1 month out of the year and then you just forget about the entire community for the rest of the year. I would like this to be, autism. I'd like to go from autism awareness to autism acceptance, and that be 24/7, 365.
Love that.
So I think that'd be the idea. We move out of the awareness stage fully, because even though some people think we have, I don't think we have, and really go into the acceptance stage of it, where and not just with autism, but just like a lot of different neurodivergent conditions where it's just more accepted and understanding that, hey, some brains are wired differently and that is okay. And those differently wired brains can provide, a lot of good and give back to society, even if, at first glance you may assume that they can't. You don't know what that person is capable of until you give them the opportunity to show what they're capable of. I want a world where we'll be able to do that.
That definitely sounds like a flawless world. So I love your answer, and I love everything that you guys are doing. So thank you for your time today, and for all those watching. If you want to learn more, connect, and support Angel and her mission, she so kindly put her organization on her screen so you can spell it appropriately. Visit them at sparkguidance.com. You guys are also on Instagram at SPARC Guidance. Anything else you want to plug? Anything you guys got coming up anytime soon, or anything that I missed in terms of supporting your mission?
Um, on the website, you'll also find the podcast. I actually have it like streamed right into the website. So if you go to the website and hit the little click for podcast, it'll bring up all the episodes. And so you can listen to it there. You can also listen to it on all the major platforms, Spotify, Amazon Music, I think like Google Podcast. It's on like everything now, I think. So I think the podcast has become like a really good way to kind of introduce people to Spark and kind of what we stand for and what we do. I also have trainings that I do on a regular basis with the Children's Services Council. So if you're a provider and you want a little bit more knowledge on autism, I have a class going through there. I think the next one is in June, called Autism and Cultural Considerations. You can just go to their training section, sign. If you're not in their system already, it's really easy to sign up for it, and then you just look up the name Autism and Cultural Considerations and you'll find it. I'm hoping to get more autism based trainings kind of in there. And if you're part of an organization and want to possibly have, me come and do a training for your staff about autism, I do custom trainings. We'll work on whatever it is that you guys want to really know with regards to autism and related conditions. Let me know. You can email me through the website.
Well, you heard it there first. So those are all the many ways you can help support this mission and everything that's going on. So thank you again, Angel, and have a flawless rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.